you are not trying to impress them. You are trying to calm your nervous system by controlling their opinion, and it is failing, so you keep paying again. Quick thing before we go deeper. We are building toward our first 1,000 subscribers, and if this kind of psychology is your thing, subscribing genuinely helps us reach the people who need it. And if this hits a nerve, tap like too, because it tells the algorithm this is worth spreading. Okay, you have felt this. You walk into a room and your brain starts performing. You explain yourself a little too much. You replay a conversation and think of a better sentence you could have said. You work harder for the person who gives you the least. And the confusing part is not that you want approval. Everyone wants some approval. The confusing part is that you want it from people who are clearly not invested. They do not listen. They do not follow up. They do not care if you win or lose. And somehow, their indifference becomes your assignment. Here is what is actually happening. Your mind is treating indifference like a problem you can solve with effort. And that assumption is the trap. Most people think this is about low self-esteem. Sometimes it is, but the deeper mechanism is closer to addiction and prediction than it is to confidence. It is your brain trying to reduce uncertainty in a social environment by buying legibility. If you can make yourself understandable, respectable, undeniable, then you feel safer, not happier, safer. And you will chase safety harder than you will chase joy. Let me show you the first piece, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. When someone does not care, they do not give you feedback. No signal, no clear approval, no clear rejection, just ambiguity. And ambiguity is not emotionally neutral. Ambiguity is expensive. The brain treats uncertain social rank as a threat, because in our evolutionary history, unclear standing inside a group meant you could be excluded without warning. Your nervous system does not say, "They are busy." It says, "My position is unstable," so you start proving, not because you love them, not because you even respect them, but because your brain wants to convert unknown into known. It is the same reason people refresh their phone after sending a risky text. The refresh is not about the content. It is about ending uncertainty. Now here is where it gets interesting. Indifferent people accidentally become the most addictive targets because they behave like a variable reward schedule. Sometimes they respond, sometimes they do not. Sometimes they give you a tiny crumb of validation, a laugh, a compliment, a good job, and then they disappear again. And the research on variable reinforcement, the classic work in operant conditioning, shows that inconsistent rewards create the most persistent behavior. Slot machines are not addictive because they always pay. They are addictive because they might. So when you keep proving yourself to someone who does not care, you are often not chasing approval. You are chasing the end of suspense. You are chasing the moment your body can finally stop scanning. Think about your own life. There is usually one person who is consistent with warmth. You appreciate them, but you do not obsess over them. And then there is the unpredictable one, the one who makes you earn it, and your mind treats their attention like a scarce resource that would raise your status if you could secure it. That leads to the second piece, and this one is uncomfortable. A lot of proving behavior is not actually an attempt to be valued. It is an attempt to be unpunishable. There is a difference. Being valued means someone enjoys you and invests in you. Being unpunishable means you are safe from criticism, dismissal, humiliation, being ignored. Many people grow up learning that love is not a steady thing, it is a performance review. You are fine as long as you are useful, impressive, easy, or exceptional. So you learn a strategy. If I become undeniable, nobody can hurt me. But that strategy creates a weird side effect. You start picking judges, you gravitate toward people who feel emotionally stingy, status-focused, or hard to please. because if you can win them over, it feels like proof that you are finally safe. You are not seeking closeness. You are seeking a verdict. And notice the pattern here. The people who care do not feel like a verdict. They feel like a relationship. The people who do not care feel like a trial. And you keep showing up to court, presenting evidence, calling witnesses, writing closing arguments for a judge who is not even paying attention. Now watch how this becomes self-reinforcing. When someone is indifferent, you will often escalate your signal. You talk more, you achieve more, you give more, you over-explain, you over-function. You become the version of yourself you think is hardest to dismiss. And if they still do not care, your brain does not conclude, they are limited. It concludes, I have not solved it yet. Because if you accept the truth that they do not care, you have to face a deeper threat. You cannot control people. You cannot guarantee belonging through performance. That is terrifying for a brain trained to survive by managing perception. So you keep proving, not to earn love, but to preserve the belief that effort controls outcomes. This connects to a psychological principle that does not get talked about enough in self-help: control bias. Humans systematically overestimate how much control they have because the belief in control reduces anxiety. If you can tell yourself, if I do it right, it will work, you get to avoid the grief of randomness. Indifferent people puncture that illusion. So you go harder. Here is a micro-test. If you think about one person you prove yourself to, ask, do I feel calmer after I impress them, or do I feel temporarily relieved and then hungry again? Calm is a relationship signal. Relief is an addiction signal. Now there is a third layer, and it explains why proving feels so urgent in the moment, even when you logically know it is pointless. Your brain is running a social credit score model. In groups, humans constantly track who has leverage, who can grant access, who can withhold it, who sets the tone, who gets listened to. We pretend we do not do this because it sounds cynical, but it is mostly automatic. And if someone looks like they have leverage, your brain treats their indifference as a dangerous data point. It is like a bank not approving you. It can mean you did something wrong, or it can mean they have a different scoring system. But your nervous system hears one thing: your access is at risk, so you try to pay. You pay with achievements, jokes, emotional labor, gifts, competence, being agreeable, being useful, being interesting, being low maintenance. Proving is a payment strategy, but there is a brutal detail most people miss. If someone does not care, your payment does not buy connection. It buys a new expectation, because humans adapt. If you always show up with extra effort, people unconsciously treat that as the baseline cost of interacting with you. And then, the one day you do not perform, they do not think they must be tired. They think, what happened? Why are they not giving me what they usually give? You train them that access to you includes your over-functioning. This is why proving yourself can make you feel even more invisible. Your best becomes your minimum. Stay with me, because this next part recontextualizes everything. Most proving is not directed at the person in front of you. It is directed at an internal observer. You have an internalized audience: a parent, a teacher, an old friend group, an ex, a culture, a younger version of you. And when you meet someone indifferent, they resemble that old audience in one key way. They do not automatically grant you worth. They make worth feel conditional. So your brain drags the past into the present and says, this is the same game. We can win it this time. That is why you can feel irrationally activated by someone you barely even like. The intensity is not proportional to the relationship. It is proportional to the memory network they touch. In neuroscience terms, your brain does pattern completion. It fills in missing information based on old templates, so an indifferent boss becomes your emotionally inconsistent caregiver. A dismissive friend becomes your middle school hierarchy. A partner who withholds affection becomes the first person who taught you that love is earned. And then your adult mind tries to solve it with adult tools, but the emotional system running the show is much older. It is not thinking, should I invest here? It is thinking, do not get exiled. Now, the mid-video shift that matters. Proving yourself is not just an individual habit. It is a social technology that other people can exploit without even being evil. Indifference creates a power asymmetry. The person who cares less has more leverage. Game theory calls this the principle of least interest. The person less invested can demand more because they risk less. And your proving is basically you trying to invert that power dynamic by increasing your value until they have to care. But in human relationships, value does not force investment. It only creates opportunity for extraction. If someone is oriented toward extraction, your proving gives them more to take. If someone is oriented toward connection, your proving is unnecessary because they already care. So the real question becomes, how do you tell the difference early before you donate years of your life? Here is the most useful diagnostic I have found, and it is not a cliché. It is about what happens after you show competence. With a person who cares, your competence creates ease. They relax, they collaborate, they reciprocate, they become more specific, more honest, more present. With a person who does not care, your competence creates demands. They raise the bar without acknowledgement. They move the goalpost. They act like your effort proves you can be used. That is not your imagination. That is a real pattern. Now let us build the unified model, because you need something you can actually apply the next time your nervous system starts performing. I call it the 3 contracts. Every time you try to prove yourself, you are implicitly signing one of 3 contracts, and you usually do not realize which one. Contract 1 is the worth contract. If I demonstrate enough value, I will be treated as valuable. This is the cleanest one. It can work in markets and skills. It is how careers function. But it fails in intimacy, because closeness is not a meritocracy. Contract 2 is the safety contract. If I perform well enough, I will not be hurt. This one is trauma-shaped. It creates perfectionism, people-pleasing, over-explaining, and chronic hypervigilance. The payoff is not love. The payoff is the temporary absence of danger. Contract 3 is the control contract. If I do this right, I can make them respond. This one is anxiety-shaped. It is the belief that there is a perfect sequence of words or actions that will unlock care in someone who is not oriented toward caring. Indifferent people are addictive because they keep all 3 contracts alive. They never fully reject you, so your worth contract stays possible. They never fully accept you, so your safety contract stays unsettled. And they stay unpredictable, so your control contract keeps spinning. So what do you do with this without turning it into empty advice? You do one specific psychological move. You stop paying to reduce uncertainty, and you start collecting data to reduce delusion. When you feel the urge to prove, do not ask, how do I win them? Ask, what data would a calm person need to decide whether this is a reciprocal system? Then run a simple experiment for a week. Lower your signal by 20%, not as a punishment, as a measurement. Speak one sentence shorter. Respond a few hours later instead of instantly. Share one less accomplishment. Offer one less rescue. Hold one boundary. And watch what happens. If they care, the relationship stays intact and often improves because you stopped over-functioning. If they do not care, they will either disappear or they will escalate demands, or they will become irritated that you are not performing. And that tells you the truth. The connection was not connection, it was access. This is the part that feels ruthless, but it is actually compassionate. You cannot build mutuality with someone who experiences you as a resource. The more you prove, the more you teach them that you exist to be evaluated and consumed. There is one more twist that will save you years. Your urge to prove is often a sign that you are in the wrong audience. High-quality people do not need you to audition. They need you to show up. They ask real questions. They respond to your reality, not your resume. They do not make you guess where you stand. So if you find yourself performing, take it as a diagnostic sensation, like physical pain. Pain is not a moral failing. It is information. The sensation says, my nervous system believes belonging is conditional here. Sometimes that belief comes from your past and you are projecting it, but often it is accurate. Often the room really is conditional. And that brings us back to the opening line. You are not trying to impress them. You are trying to calm your nervous system. You are trying to buy certainty from someone who sells ambiguity. So the real growth move is not be more confident. It is more surgical than that. It is learning to tolerate the discomfort of not being chosen by people you would not even want to become. Because the moment you stop trying to control indifferent people, you reclaim something they were quietly taking from you. Your attention, which is the only real currency you have. If this changed how you see your own proving patterns, tell me in the comments who you catch yourself performing for and what contract you think you are trying to sign. And next time you feel that familiar urge to explain, impress, or earn, ask yourself one question and do not dodge it. Am I trying to create connection or am I trying to purchase relief?